It's been a long, long time, but we are back for a season finale because we got to talk about how the Jets season finished, but more importantly, the head coach search, the GM search. What happens with Aaron freaking Rodgers? What do they do at quarterback? A lot of off-season questions to address. So it's Jake Brown here. It's Jake and Jake. My buddy Jake Asman, of course, of the Jake Asman Show on ESPN Radio in New York, will join me. We're live on YouTube. Come on down and join us for the season finale of Jets Flight Club.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Jets Fight Club. The sickest New York Jets podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Welcome back to the Sick Podcast, Jets Flight Club. Jake Brown at Jake Brown Radio here. It's been a long road since we took a hiatus because the Jets were terrible for mental health. So it's been a long time. Last show we did was, I believe, November. So it's been about 6 to 7 weeks, but the season is over. So now we could breathe and we have relief. I was also away for a couple of weeks, so it didn't really work out, but we are here. And welcome aboard. Make sure you smash that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube live, or if you're watching this back on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. Comment below. What do you want the Jets to do at head coach? What do you want them to do at GM? What do you want them to do with Aaron Rodgers? Give us your predictions in the comments below and tweet me at Jake Brown Radio. Subscribe to my YouTube. Follow the Mets Magic Podcast, Mets Daily. A new daily Mets YouTube show is coming. We got a lot of content cooking, TikTok lives every day, every weekday. So make sure you stay locked into that. The Jets, they win, the kings of winning games when they hurt their draft stock. 32-20 over the Miami Dolphins. They finished the season 5-12. And every day there's a new report of a new head coach that got interviewed, a new GM candidate that got interviewed. So we will dive into that search completely. And a guy who is probably sick and tired of talking about them because he does them every day, but he does a good job of doing it. It's Jake Asman, who joins me now. Jake and Jake. Now, Jake, I have introduced to the world of caviar because he does love his caviar now and chicken bites. And you know, we had a brief run of New York City until I left, but hopefully there will be a return this year, and we could go see Juan Soto out in Queens. How about that?
I'm good on the Soto part, but I'm looking forward to your return to the city, Jake. It's not the same without you.
Yeah, I do miss caviar and caviar and common ground. There's CNC, and you know, I don't miss watching the Jets, and I'm sure you're in agreement with that. I think it's good to move on to the Knicks now. Who, you know, Cat was out. People calm down that they lost to the Magic. But I think we're ready to move on to the Knicks. Obviously, we had plenty of Jets off-season talk, but in terms of game and watching football, I think we're content, Jake, on watching playoff football because, listen, this team was a rough watch, an underachieving unit. You know, they had some fun moments of a very handful, maybe at the most, but this was a rough season, a brutal season, and a season that we had, you know, Super Bowl aspirations. And from what this season ended up as, Jake, it was incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, this was the worst season ever of my lifetime, being a fan of the Jets. And, you know, I talk to people all the time on my show that go back way longer than I have, and they say it's right up there with any of the worst seasons they've ever seen, given the expectations, given what happened last year where we were robbed of watching Rodgers play with this team. They still win 7 games, and you're thinking, okay, well, at the bare minimum, even if you didn't believe in the hype of this team being a legit Super Bowl contender, you know, they won 7 without Rodgers last year with, objectively speaking, the worst quarterback play in the league. There's no reason why they can't win at least 9 or 10 games and be a playoff team, right? And somehow, you know, the Jets go out there and they start 2-6, and the season's effectively over, and they finish with just 5 wins. So it's been brutal. And, you know, the only positive is that it's finally over and that the Jets have a chance, if they get the right GM and coach combination, they have a chance to turn it around like some other NFL teams that have been, you know, historic losers have been able to do. So that's really what you're looking for now. Just what's the process to getting the GM and coach in here, and who those guys are going to be.
And quarterback's a big problem right now. I think I know where you're at. I think you want to keep Rodgers, unless the guy who told you he was getting interviewed, who I believe is getting interviewed like right now, and I'm sure he's eating a breakfast sandwich like Mike Williams did while talking to the Jets, Rex Ryan, who has zero interest. He would send Aaron Rodgers to the country club or whatever the quote was, that he has no interest. I am team move on. I just think the distractions, I don't think he was the greatest teammate. I think father time has caught up with him. I think a year older, he's only going to be a year worse, in my opinion. I think we're in a league, Jake, where every good team has a quarterback that has some kind of mobility. The worst of them is maybe Jared Goff, but even he has some kind of mobility, and he's just has a good arm, and he's just a younger player. You just need to get outside the pocket, and he was unable to do that. And I only think he's going to get hurt even worse a year older. He battled a ton of injuries this year. I just don't think bringing him back is the wisest move for the future of the team. What say you?
Well, I think it depends on a couple things. I think his mobility was limited because he was coming off the injury, and then in the middle of the season, he was playing through a ton of injuries. I'd say the last 6 games, though, he was mobile. Like even on this touchdown he threw to Devontae, his last one, if he retires, yeah, that was him running around the pocket, buying a couple extra seconds, and then finding them. For me, I'm on board with bringing Rodgers back if that's what the next GM and coach want to do. The last thing I think the Jets should do is have Woody Johnson make that decision. And here's the thing with Rex, too, by the way. A month ago, he was all about bringing Rodgers back. Now he thinks because Woody doesn't want him, he'll say whatever he needs to say, seemingly to try and get the job. So he's like, oh, if I'm the coach and Rodgers is here, there's not going to be this country club environment anymore where you show up whenever you want. And it's like, Rex, we're really going to bring up something from June as a reason why this team was bad. They started 2-1. Let's stop with that nonsense. So Rex will say whatever. I don't think he's going to get the job. I love the guy personally, but I'd be surprised if he got the job. But there's just not a whole lot of better options out there. I mean, the guy threw 28 touchdowns this year, third most ever by a Jet quarterback in a single season. I get the part about his age and being a year older, but if Rodgers took a pay cut and was actually willing to learn a new offensive scheme that's not archaic, I'm more open to it. If they move on because he's 41, turning 42, and he's resistant to do that, I get it. I just think, who gives you the best chance to win next year? I still think it's Aaron Rodgers if you put a real team around him. I mean, if this defense wasn't a sieve after they fired Saleh, if Greg Zuerlein's leg didn't probably cost him anywhere from 2 to 3 games, I think we're having a whole different conversation on what this season is. And you put up, like if Rodgers played how he did this year on last year's version of the Jets, they make the playoffs easily. So I guess that's part of my frustration. It's like that injury basically just set everything back, gave mulligans to a coaching staff that really didn't deserve one in hindsight. But if they move on, which I think ultimately they're going to, I'm very curious to see what they do, what their plan is at that position.
Yeah, I mean, a clean slate just makes the most sense to me. And listen, what happened with Garrett Wilson? Garrett Wilson clearly does not like Aaron Rodgers. And
that's not what he has said, though, is the only thing. I think Garrett Wilson hates losing more than anything.
I agree, but I don't think he loved what happened with Adams coming in there and clearly being his favorite receiver. And I think the combination of losing and Rodgers, Garrett's doing all he can. I mean, you were in the suite with him at ESPN Radio New York suite. He is the consummate professional. Like, he is a guy that you would put a C on his chest one day if he lives to see that day in a Jets uniform, which it does not feel. His future just feels bleak. And how could you blame him? Like, he's got the likes of Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, now Rodgers throwing the ball. Like, he's had so many quarterbacks that either on the back end of the career or just weren't legit NFL quarterbacks throwing him the ball. And he's seeing guys get the ball thrown from Goff and Pat Mahomes and Josh Allen, who are having all the success in the world. I'm worried that Garrett's going to be gone. And I don't know if they're going to trade him or they just won't give him a new contract or he won't want a new contract here. But that's what I worry. And I'm not saying a clean slate changes that. Like, he may just be, mentally checked out here and just have no more interest in being in a Jet. But I worry that a guy that we thought was going to be such a future asset to this franchise, Jake, is completely checked out and won't be a Jet for maybe beyond next year.
I'll calm you down by saying this. He has no leverage and he's under contract for 2 more years plus the franchise tag. So he can request a trade like plenty of other receivers have and end up not getting moved. I also don't think he's going to based on his most recent comments. I think he should be extended, though. Whether Rodgers is here or not, I think one of the first things a new GM should do is be like, you're a part of our future. Like, you're a guy that is all about the right things. He's had 3 years in a row, over 1,000 yards, had over 100 catches this year. Like, that's the guy that you sign long term. I think Garrett just wants to win. I mean, Garrett Wilson, I think I saw the stat, lost 8 games between high school and college, and then he comes to the Jets, and all he's known is losing. So I think that's a big part of his frustration. You know, I think guys truly do like Rodgers, though. I mean, Brees Hall is retweeting Joe Namath's tweet about bringing Rodgers back. So I do think, you know, some of that stuff is like overblown. I think there's just a lot of frustration with losing. So they got to get Garrett on the same page with everything. I think part of that is going back to what we were talking about. Run a real offense, a modern scheme, not just this like buddy ball. Rodgers going to change all the plays and do whatever the heck he wants to the line of scrimmage. They need to get back to running the ball better. They ran the ball the least amount of times of any NFL team, despite, I believe, having some pretty good running backs in that room. So hire a real offensive coach, hire a real run game coordinator. It can't be Keith Carter, who's the O-line coach and the run game coordinator, and get back to being a balanced offense. And I'm telling you, you'll win more games if you have a real coaching staff. Like, to me, by far the biggest issue with this football team this year was not one player, this or that. It was the just coach in general, whether it was Saleh, who wasn't great, but it's Vince Lombardi compared to Ulbrich, and that's when it all fell apart.
Yeah, their coaching staff was atrocious across the board, and Nathaniel Hackett was picking his nose up in the press boxes. You know, once his role was out the window, he was just getting a cushy paycheck, and you know, the whole staff they got a clean house. And I don't know, no, everyone's saying that they've gone defensive head coach route. It doesn't work. Go with an offensive minded coach. I just think they need better coaching staff. Period. Like, listen, my favorite is Aaron Glenn. I just think, like I said about Rabel, him and Woody will butt heads constantly. It'll never work. Woody wants to be so involved and too far involved that him and Rabel won't work. And I think it's a lock. Rabel's going to the Patriots, so I think that's a moot point anyway. I just think Glenn can be a leader of men. It can be like a D'Amico Ryans. And I think the one, a black head coach, I think would be great for the Jets. Two, I think a former Jet player as a head coach would be great for this team. I think you're seeing, Jake, that some of these former players do gain the respect of other players. Like, they do have that certain level of respect of, you've been there, you've done that, and you've done it at a high level in this league, that I'm going to play my ass off for you. And I think what Aaron Glenn has done with the Lions defense, that Lions defense on paper is not world beaters. They're good, but they're not world beaters. And I think he really leads that group as well as he can. And I mean, you saw even the Pistons game last night, they showed him on the scoreboard, and the guy got like a 5-minute ovation. And obviously that's more so because the Lions just clinched the 1 seed. But I think Glenn is just very well respected in that city, and he might not leave. They may offer him a pay bump and he stays. And if they maybe go to the Super Bowl and lose, he may want to run it back. But I can't see a world where he doesn't want to be the head coach of the team where he shined in the greatest city in the world. The pay bump that he would get, even if the Lions give him a pay bump, he's not going to make New York head coach kind of money, which is, $4 or $5 million a year. So to me, I think Glenn is the best option. I know you are in a different boat, but what do you think about head coach?
Yeah, I don't want any first-timer. If they are going to go down the first-time head coach route, Glenn I like. I just wish he wasn't a defensive guy. He feels like Robert Saleh 2.0. And look, you bring up Rabel. Mike Vrabel's a better coach than Aaron Glenn. He's a known commodity. And I think your pushback on, Woody and Vrabel wouldn't get along. You think Woody Johnson is going to have faith in a guy in Aaron Glenn if they start losing next year, and all of a sudden Aaron Glenn with no experience to point to that he knows what he's doing, he's going to be able to handle that? That's my fear. I don't want anyone learning on the job. I don't think this is a job.
Well, Woody thinks he can coddle him. He wants to have a guy he can somewhat coddle, where Vrabel's going to go in his room and punch him in the face. Vrabel's the number one candidate. I agree with you. You don't think at all, like, it's not realistic, not just because Woody, but doesn't it feel like a lock he's a Patriot already?
If I had to bet on it, I think he's going to end up with the Patriots. But the one scenario where I could see him being available, the Patriots are also interviewing Ben Johnson. And if they want an offensive coach for Drake May, to me, Mike Vrabel then could become available. I mean, they passed on him a year ago. Plus, Robert Kraft is known to be cheap. You can criticize Woody Johnson for a lot of things. I don't think being cheap is one of them. I think he'd pay up if Vrabel ends up being their guy. Based on his comments, and look, Woody could just be saying it. It truly does sound like he wants to hire the people and let them do their job. He lost complete faith in Saleh and Douglas, which is why he meddled, and it was so public about meddling. Plus, if you remember, while he owned the team then, both guys were hired when Chris was overseeing the team when he was the ambassador to the UK. So this is the first time the Jets are in a spot where GM and coach both need to be hired at the same time, and it's Woody who's the owner and is doing it. It's the first time since 2015 when they got the great hires of Mike McCagnon and Todd Bowles. So I agree with you. I think if I had to bet, Vrabel's going to the Pats. But there is that one scenario where if they hire Ben Johnson, say, in New England, all of a sudden Vrabel could still be available. I like Glenn. Jake. I don't love the defensive guy with no previous head coaching experience. I much rather Brian Flores if they're going to hire a guy with a defensive background.
So say Vrabel's gone. Is Flores your favorite? But you just said you want an offensive guy, and he's a defensive guy.
Correct. I want experience more than anything else, though. To me, and unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of offensive guys with experience unless you want like Matt Nagy or Arthur Smith, who I'm not in love with. So Brian Flores to me would be probably my number 2. You look at his resume, 2 of his 3 years in Miami, he had a winning season. He's going to probably end up being right about Tua, and he said that he has learned how to handle a young quarterback and the relationship there. He had a year under Mike Tomlin once he got fired. He's had the last 2 years under Kevin O'Connell leading that Vikings defense now. If he could get his offensive coordinator hire right, I think he's perfect. Disciplinarian, no-nonsense guy. He'd fix the Jet defense. I also think the fact that he hates the Dolphins and he's from Brooklyn is a nice bonus too. So he'd be pretty high up on my list if they can't get Vrabel. If I had to pick an offensive guy with experience that I'm intrigued by for getting another opportunity, I like what Cliff Kingsbury has done in Washington. He's talked about what he's learned from Dan Quinn. Second time around, I'm sure there's a bunch of things he'd do differently. And we can coach quarterbacks. Like, it feels like Jaden Daniels is a lock to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He had Kyler in Arizona. He was the Offensive Rookie of the Year, made the playoffs in one of his years out there. So he'd be the most handsome coach in New York. And I think that would be very intriguing if Cliff got this job.
Yeah, we love a handsome coach, but I don't know if that'll factor in for Woody. I mean, it outduels Woody, who is not handsome and is old.
Oh, come on. Dick Johnson, he looks great.
How about Brick Johnson? How about Brick? Maybe he'll give out a game ball. I mean, how awkward is that? How does a 17-year-old kid give out a game ball after the biggest win of the year for the team? That whole thing is just laughable to me. And, for the family listening to the Gangs All Here podcast, they were fans of, like, thanks for the listens, but damn, you're listening to my dumbass. Like, that's insane. But I would agree that I like Florida. Here, the candidates, I think, no, Arthur Smith, no the hell thank you. I will very much pass on him. I will very much pass on Matt Nagy. I will very much pass on Ron Rivera. I think if you want to look at the Mount Rushmore of head coaching candidates, it's Vrabel, Glenn, Flores, and Kingsbury. Would you agree with that 4?
Vrabel, Glenn, Flores, Kingsbury.
In some kind of order.
Yeah, I like that list. If I'm going to talk about other guys, first-timers deserving maybe another chance, Liam Cohen, the Bucs offensive coordinator, I think is intriguing. He's done a good job there. Trying to think who else. Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator. It's so tough with these guys, right? Like, is Joe Brady bringing Josh Allen with him? Is even a guy like Kingsbury, is he going to bring Jane Daniels with him? It's tough. I like your list. Aaron Glenn, I think, is going to end up being the guy that gets this job if I had to pick one. But I'm just not in love with another defensive guy with no previous coaching experience. But I'm a Jet fan, so I'm going to hope for the best and expect the worst.
Yeah, and you also want a guy that, wants to be here. I think Glenn would want to be here. Some guys might just come here for the check because, listen, it's a tough place to play. You're under an owner that's literally in the locker room every game, an owner that is very much involved, has been involved. He claims he won't be, but I think we all know he will be in Woody Johnson. You got a team that hasn't made the playoffs now, going on 15 years. They haven't won a Super Bowl since 1969, so it is a tough place to play. But with it comes benefits. If you do win, you're a guy. I mean, Rex Ryan, why he's a candidate, is because he's the last coach that led the Jets to any kind of playoff success. And there's a part of me that's like, let's run it back with Rex. Let's give it a try. The emotional side, that's what I think with a relatable in some ways, although it's much different, is Mets fans obsessing over bringing Pete Alonso back. Is the emotional side to it. He's not actually the greatest first baseman ever. He's actually a very boomer bust player. You hear about that on Mets Magic, but I think Mets fans are too involved with Pete. That's a current guy. In terms of old guys, fans do love Rex, but I don't think that's realistic. But I think he deserved an interview. I think that was nice of the Jets, I guess, to give him an interview. But what? He hasn't coached in 9 years, 10 years in the league, last with Buffalo. So poor Rex probably won't get it. Although he thinks, I love the confidence though. Like, he thinks I am the best guy for the job. I texted you after I saw that per Jake Asman. I was like, fine. I didn't get my credit for having the Juan Soto news first, but I'm glad you got your credit for the Rex Ryan interview.
Thank you. Yeah, look, Rex, he's going to get a chance because we all know Rex knows what he wants to hear. He's basically been campaigning on TV. He's flip-flopped on his Rodgers opinion several times because he's trying to basically say whichever way he thinks the wind is blowing in regards to what he thinks is the answer there. I like Rex. Would I take Rex over probably Aaron Glenn and some other first timers? I probably would, to be honest with you. But I didn't love his answer yesterday when they asked him on DNR, hey, do you know what your staff would look like? And he's like, nope, but it's going to be the best staff. And it's like, coach, you've been out of the league a decade. Like, you're not prepared to answer the question on what your coaching staff might look like if you get this job. Like, you're a huge underdog to get the job. Don't you got to kind of be prepared to answer that question? So I don't think he's going to get the job. I think giving him an interview is just out of courtesy because it's fan service. It'd be embarrassing if he's campaigning for the job and he doesn't even end up getting a chance to speak for it. But I'd be very surprised, Jake, if he got this gig.
Rex Ryan giving the very much similar answer to someone else who has a high role, maybe in this country, in about 2 weeks. That'll take over with a similar. I don't know my coaching staff. I have a plan, but it is not I don't know the plan yet. How about the GM search? I'm more intrigued by the coaching search. I think GMs is kind of just throw something against the wall, hope it sticks. I mean, you obviously want a guy that has developed talent in the draft. You want a guy that's had success in free agency. Thomas Dimitroff, John Robinson, Jim Nagy, Luis. I got Luis Castillo on my mind. Louis Riddick. Those are 4 of the names. Let me know some other names, and who do you think is the best GM hire here?
It's so tough with a GM because you never really know what a GM assistant does. Like, there's so many different type of roles in a front office. I really do, just like with coach though, prefer someone who's not a first timer. I prefer experience. I like that Thomas Dimitroff was their first interview at GM. I thought he did a really good job in Atlanta. He was there a long time, hired 2 coaches that went to the playoffs, drafted a franchise quarterback in Matt Ryan. I mean, if the Falcons didn't have the biggest collapse in the history of professional sports, he'd have a Super Bowl ring on his finger. So I think he's a good GM. I think he deserves an opportunity for a second chance. So I'm intrigued by him. I know the Jets are going to be interviewing Mike Borgonzi today, who's the Chiefs assistant GM. A lot of people around the league talk about his track record, his resume, all the different roles he's had with the Chiefs, and think he's ready to be a GM. So he's a name that I find interesting. But, if you told me right now, Jake, it's a guy in Dimitroff who has previous GM experience and obviously Vrabel, but let's take him off the board because we assume he goes to New England, and Brian Flores, where the 2 of them had overlap in New England. 2 guys with experience that have been in their roles before. I'm in. I really just don't want the first timers who come here be eaten alive by the Brian Costellos and Rich Siminis of the world and the fan base pressure. It's just, I can't do it anymore, man. So give me guys who have done it. And I think Dimitroff, out of the names they've talked to so far, is the best name on the list.
Yeah, he's been out of the league for, it'll be on almost 5 years now. So that's my worry there with him.
He's been involved in analytics, though. He has a sports analytics company that NFL teams use to help him. I had him on my show last year and was very impressed. And was like, how come he never got a chance? He's like, unlike coaches, once you're done being a GM, it's tough to get a second shot. And that always stuck with me. And I'm thinking, but why? Like, there's so many GMs in the league who are awful. Why not hire someone who wasn't perfect? That's why he's fired in the first place. But, as good as Howie Roseman is, he's the same guy that took Carson Wentz. He's the same guy that took Jalen Reagor 1 pick before Justin Jefferson. So, even the best GMs make mistakes. I thought he was a pretty good GM. I want someone with experience.
Yeah, I think Louis Riddick would be a mistake. I don't really have any interest in Louis Riddick. This guy's been out of the league forever. He's just been on TV forever. I agree. I think Dimitroff would be all right. And listen, he did win 2 Super Bowls with the Patriots in scouting. So he at least scouted some players that helped them win a Super Bowl. So he does have 2 rings as a scout. I don't know if that counts for much, but hey, it's 2 more rings than we got here. So I would be okay with Dimitroff. Dimitroff, Glenn, it would be probably my prediction. And then, offensive coordinator, I guess the homer in me wants Josh McCown. My mom tutored his daughter in North Carolina. He was a friend of the Gangs All Here podcast, one of the nicest dudes probably that used to play, just a really good dude, and has done good things as a quarterback coach. Does he intrigue you as OC? Everyone says get an offensive minded head coach. I just don't think it's going to happen. So getting the right OC is important because, like you said, this coaching staff, Ulbrich was good as DC, was terrible as head coach. Hackett was a terrible OC. Downing was a terrible OC. They need, like you said, a modern day play caller. Is there any names out there that you could think of?
McCown is intriguing if you pair him up with Brian Flores as the head coach, and he's like, I want to take you, McCown, make you the OC. You get a promotion after being the quarterback's coach. And look, I don't think Sam Darnold would lead the Vikings, but what about J.J. McCarthy? Maybe you could get a trade for him and he could be your answer at quarterback. So I'm intrigued by it. I was in Houston doing afternoon radio when Josh McCown, fresh off of retirement, got an interview to be the head coach of the Houston Texans and came actually very close to getting that job. So I could see McCown being an intriguing name to watch. I don't think the Jets would hire him to be the head coach, but as an OC, Jake, that'd be awesome. I mean, just the way McCown always handled himself, you knew he had a future coaching if he wanted to do it. And now he's kind of paid his dues the last few years in Carolina, now with Minnesota. So I definitely would be in on a Josh McCown OC, and maybe let's say it's Brian Flores as the head coach.
That tells you something. When a guy gets an interview out of no experience, it tells you what people think about him. And I think that's a good sign that he's already got a lot of. I mean, this guy was coaching high school. I believe he was coaching his son in high school. I don't remember.
He was. Yep.
He was. Yeah. He was coaching his son, who I believe was a quarterback as well. And then Panthers quarterbacks coach, Vikings quarterbacks coach, and obviously he's done good things there. I'm not sure the Vikings are sold. I think they're probably going to try and franchise tag Darnold and keep McCarthy around. I also, with that kind of injury and the setback he had, I don't know if I love McCarthy as an option for the Jets. Justin Fields is more intriguing to me than I think a lot of people. I don't know. I don't think he's the most intriguing option, but I think you may consider him for a year as kind of a bridge guy. You're obviously not drafting anyone in the first round with the 7th pick. So I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. To me, like coaching, this is all cool and all, but a lot of it rides on who is the quarterback of this team. And that's the issue, Jake. We don't have that answer. We threw out possibilities, Fields, McCarthy. I don't think Tyrod Taylor is a realistic bridge. Obviously, they're not having a top 5 pick. They're not getting Sanders or Ward. Maybe they get Milroe later on. I'm not in love with that. Throw me some more names that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head at quarterback, because in the end, as good as obviously the coaching staff we know needs to be better. That's obvious, but we need to figure out who the quarterback is.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you hit on some of the names. I like Tyrod as the bridge, but you need a quarterback behind him because he's going to get hurt. He's not going to make it through 17 games. That's just what his history is. If you told me they had a Tyrod Taylor and Justin Fields quarterback room, to me, you're kind of copying what Pittsburgh did last year, right? Bringing 2 veterans, bringing a young guy, bringing a seasoned vet who does have upside with the right coaching. That's what Pittsburgh did with Fields and Russell Wilson a year ago, and it's worked. I mean, it helps when you have Mike Tomlin, who every year can find a way to win games. But, say the Jets improve coaching, they get their defense back on track with the talent that's there, find a kicker who's not going to cost them 3 games. Justin Fields and I think Tyrod Taylor can game manage you to playing meaningful games in December, being competitive. You're not throwing away next season before it even begins. So I like that idea. Look, no one saw Sam Darnold doing what he did. No one saw Baker Mayfield 2 years ago breaking out. These are former first-round picks, though, top 10 picks that had talent that needed to be coached better. Maybe Fields could do what those guys did. It's unlikely, but if I would have told you Sam Darnold would lead the Vikings to 14 wins this year, you would have thought I was high. So I feel like it's not a awful idea to take a shot on Fields, and you already have Tyrod under contract at a small number. So I'd be shocked if they move on from Rodgers if Tyrod's not on the team.
Yeah, Darnold is not happening. I'm not interested in Brissett, Lance, Heineke, Mariota, Locke, Dalton, not Flacco. Winston has been brought up. I just think he just turns the ball over. As fun as Jameis Winston is as the person, and when he does have great moments, it's fun. I don't think Jameis Winston in New York is a realistic thing that's going to happen. No to Mac, Jimmy Garoppolo, like these names, at least in the free agent market. Obviously, there might be a trade available, but that's why Fields on at least the free agent list makes sense. And I think their hope is that Travis is the guy. Their hope is that one day maybe Travis is their quarterback, and if he comes back and makes it work. Let's go into the chat now. Good morning, Armand. What do you think happens with Breece Hall? He'll be a free agent after next year. He was a 2nd-round pick and on a rookie 4-year deal.
It's going to be interesting. I don't think they'll do anything with an extension, but since he doesn't have the 5th-year option, he's obviously going to be a free agent. I mean, you have the franchise tag, worst case scenario. Maybe he is a guy that if you do you could try and extend him now and say, hey, we're going to pay you out over the 2 years of the franchise tag, so you don't have to worry about it. And, the Jets could, manipulate his cap number. Because the only downside of using the tag on someone, that full amount counts directly against your cap. So if you want to try and save some cap, you could structure a Breece Hall extension where he gets the money he'd get from the franchise tag anyway, but you don't take it all on each year, affecting your cap. I doubt they would extend him. It doesn't feel like something they're going to do, but that's one option for them. I think he'll play out the final year of his contract, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, there's no reason to extend him right now. And I'm going to sound like a get off my lawn old man, but I am sick and tired of these players quote tweeting fans and content creators and coming after them. You saw it with Ahmad Gardner and Matt O'Leary and that whole situation. You're Breece now. Listen, optimism Jets, whatever that account was, tweeting negative stuff is hilarious. But I can't. You have the right to do it, but you won 5 games. Like sometimes, Jake, I don't know if you agree with me. These guys got to like log off for a second and stop coming after fans who are. Why do they pay for tickets? Like, how about a player says, "Hey, why are you guys paying to see it?" People still go out and pay to see them lose year after year, and fans are fed up and tired. And yes, I'm not in the boat of tweeting players and saying you suck, you did this. I think that's childish, but you're in the league, you make millions of dollars. That's what you have to deal with is some of these lunatic fans, and sometimes you just got to log off. And I think some of these young Jets players, while they are good players, Jake, they are too online. They are streaming too much. You know, Gardner was worried more about streaming than tackling. He was on kick more than on kick coverage. He was, he was on these websites more than he was, making big plays on the football field. Breece Hall is a great player. Had kind of a down year. Not all his fault. He didn't get the ball a lot, but he's talking a lot online. And like sometimes these guys just gotta, I don't want to say shut up, but sometimes they gotta just pipe down a little bit here and get back to trying to win football games instead of coming after people that are paying for jerseys, paying for tickets, and going to see them. I know that's a very get off my lawn old man thing to say. And I'm 33. I'm not 63. I sound like my father, Jake. But I just think some of these guys got to dial back when you're losing this bad.
I agree. I think that's where a real coach needs to come in and basically say enough. Like let's stop airing out our dirty laundry online. Let's stop saying anything that the media is going to run with and create headlines and a story. Like that has to all stop. That's coaching. That's leadership. That's the culture. That all needs to be fixed. I mean, the entire building needs to be fumigated. It should have been fumigated yesterday. That's a perfect example of the stuff that just needs to change with the real leadership team coming in.
All right, a couple more minutes because I know you got a show at 10. What's good, Jake? John Santos, my high school classmate. Who's the coach, GM, tandem you want? We went over that. I think Dimitrov, Glenn, Vrabel obviously is what we want, but I'm not sure.
Vrabel pick his GM. The Jets are the only team with a GM opening right now. It's one of the selling points of the job potentially for a coach. Hey, you get your guy if you want.
Yeah, who do you think they hire? I mean, if they hire Glenn, I guess they got to wait until after they're done, which could be February. Do they go the GM? Usually it's GM first, then coach. What do you think they end up doing?
I think they're going to hire the GM first and then the coach. I think the only exception is obviously Vrabel, because Vrabel has said, hey, he'd take the Jet job if he likes the GM that is in place. So if you really want him, I think the selling point would be, hey, Mike, who do you want the GM to be? And then we could align you two together. But I do agree with you. I still think it's likely he ends up going to New England. So it's probably going to end up being a moot point.
Joseph Alberti is in the chat saying that I cried. I'm sure you did over Zach. Well, I mean, are we still mentioning Zach? Like, it's Zach fault. Zach was a terrible quarterback. Like, I can't believe there's still these truthers out. Like, obviously the coaching is bad. We get it. But like, yes, it is still Zach's fault. They sucked the last couple of years. He was terrible at quarterback. Stop blaming everyone else but him. And then Billy said Rex wants the Jets. He bleeds green. He bring personality to the Jets, a clean house. He will hire Woody. Woody has something to prove. Rex also knows how to play Woody like a violin. Yeah, but
that's why he'd get the job more so than anything else.
It's not 2010 anymore. Like this was 14 years, 13, 12, however many years ago it's been too long to really say that. So we'll see. Jake Asman, you can catch him on YouTube, of course. The Jake Asman Show. Subscribe to his YouTube, his Patreons, everything else that you do. ESPN New York, Mad Dog Radio. He does it all at Jake Asman on Twitter. Jake, I hope to be back in New York. My birthday's coming up in a month, so I might come back for a birthday celebration evening. And then you'll see by baseball season. You know me, if I'm not in the vicinity of Citi Field by April, I might lose my mind and my head might explode. So We got to be there. And listen, I go to Yankee games too. And Billy says Jake is amazing. Asmaniacs rock. So you got the hat on.
Thank you, Billy.
I need some free gear. I don't think I should pay a dime for gear after all the caviar that I fed you. I think actually you fed me. I probably should pay because you did get me a Hillstone dinner. So
Yeah, see, I took good care of you. I take care of my guys on their way out of town.
Yeah, you're like, get out. Here's some steak or prime rib, whatever we had.
I love it.
All right, I know you got a show, so I appreciate you joining me, and we'll talk soon.
My pleasure, Jake. And let's get you back to New York. All right. I mean, this podcast is great remote, but we got to do an in-person podcast when you move back here.
Yes, I had like Rocco's and multiple plays are asking me to go in the city and do some kind of show. So we will do a joint show one day, hopefully next season with a competent quarterback, coach, GM, and better Jets days ahead. Jake Asman, Happy New Year. Can't really say that anymore.
Can we say that still? I don't know. But anyway, for one last time, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That's Jake Asman. Give him a follow. He does a great job. Free gear. Come on, Jake. Yeah. Listen, I deserve maybe a free hat. You know, I do a lot of streaming. Like it's free plug. It's free promotion. So I look at it as like that. So yeah, I think Aaron Glenn ends up being the Jets head coach, guys. I think we may just have to wait for the Lions to be done, which could be a Super Bowl. But Aaron Glenn feels like he will be the guy. I just don't see the other. You got to think about working with Woody Glenn playing here. I think he would actually really want the job. I don't know how the other guys really. And listen, Nagy, no. Flores, yes, he has coaching experience, 2 winning seasons. Hasn't been a playoff head coach. So I think you would be fine with Flores. You'd be fine with Glenn. No Nagy, no Rivera, no Arthur Smith. And Vrabel, I think, goes to the Patriots. So again, the coach is great and all. The GM's great and all. Give me a quarterback. Give me players. Give me high character players. Hassan Reddick was a train wreck. DJ Reed clearly, DJ Reed was good here, but clearly wants to be out. Tyler Conklin's a free agent. I think he's a good guy. I would bring him back. Jamie Sherwood had a great year. Might end up getting paid. Maybe the Jets don't want to pay him, but the Jets are going to be in a position where you got to be realistic here. They're not going to be a playoff team next year. If they move on from Rodgers, they still have to pay him. Their cap situation is going to be crappy, and they're going to be a 7-win team at probably is generous next year. So you got to deal with another year that the team just is not great. Jake, you doing any Mets stream soon? Yes. Well, when the Mets make a move, we will do Mets Magic. I am starting today. Mets Daily is coming to YouTube today, a daily Mets YouTube show. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited for that. The page will be available later today. I'm going to be recording that after this, the first episode of Mets Daily. So if you're a Mets fan watching this, we got an 8 to 10 minute daily Mets show. I don't know if there's any other one on the planet. There might be like one other, but they're terrible. So we will be the #1 daily Mets video YouTube show. So excited for that. And yeah, live on TikTok every weekday, 5:05 p.m. And whenever any Mets or Jets news break, we will be live on TikTok. We'll go on YouTube. So stay tuned for that. And Mets Magic, like I said, sick podcast, Mets Magic. Once the Mets make a move, like if Pete signs, we'll obviously do a show. Or if they get someone else that's a decent name, we will get a show as well. So thank you, everybody, for watching. That's it for the Jets season. 5-12, it was a disaster. Like Jake Asman said, worst season of our lives. We had Super Bowl aspirations, and they finished with 5 wins. A disgrace. The coaching staff was a train wreck, and they have a busy offseason ahead, and they got to figure out a quarterback, and I think you just have to start fresh. Aaron, as good as you might think he is, Father Time has caught up with him. He's not the same. He's a nutcase. Everything off the field, you have to move on from Aaron Rodgers, and I think they will. I think they do make the right move and move on, and maybe like Jake said and we said, Jake and Jake, Fields, Tyrod combo, and you develop the kid at Florida State. I just forgot his name. Jordan Travis. So Travis is intriguing, but again, had a setback in his injury this year. We'll see where he, when he ends up playing. I get it. Fields is not great, but no one in this class in free agency is great. McCarthy, I just worry that the injury and the setback, will he even be ready? So we'll see. And whenever they make a GM hire, they make a coach hire, we will be back here on Jets Flight Club. I'm Jake Brown Radio. Subscribe to my YouTube at Jake Brown Radio. Follow me on all social media at Jake Brown Radio. That puts the bow, though, on this 24 2024 Jets season. We look ahead to 2025. And like I said, emergency show. Whenever a hiring and a big move is made, we will be here to cover it. But until then, we take a break from Jets land. We breathe. I couldn't wait for the season to end. The games were unwatchable. This team was a disgrace. And, Eric Coleman, he said goodnight. Like, once the Jets were so bad, this was supposed to be me and Eric Coleman all year. I think because the Jets were just unwatchable, Eric just checked out, and I can't blame him. And by Thanksgiving, I checked out. And I was watching Red Zone in December. I was not watching Jets games from beginning to end because they were unwatchable. So that's that. This is the Sick Podcast, Jets Flight Club. Jake Brown at Jake Brown Radio. Checking out at SickPodJets on Twitter. Smash that thumbs up. Share this with your Jets fan friends. Thanks, everybody, for watching. It's really yesterday was the cutoff, but I haven't got to say it yet on here. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Jets Fight Club on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.